What's up guys? So I asked a bunch of artists that are in my mentorship group program to ask me some of their questions that they have for what does it take and what tools you need to get started as a digital artist. So let's get into it.
Dominic, Lauren Wright Artist here. My question for you is, what do you think is the best tablet for beginners? Thanks so much.
We have to start now.
Alright, so the best tablet for artists that are starting out with digital art is by far the iPad Air or the iPad Pro. But that's not the tablet that I started out with. I started out with a Cintiq 12WX. And back then when I bought it, it was 2012 and I had to pay $1,000 to get it. So I was selling my Xbox and my video games. I sold part of my comic book collection to get it.
Only made a couple thousand. Oh my God.
But it was that tablet that helped me get my foot in the door. I created a bunch of different artwork for children's books back then. That's when I started getting hired for doing covers for like teen novels. So that was a great tablet. And the equivalent of that tablet today is the Wacom One. The only thing about that tablet though is it's not an all-in-one device. It's a drawing tablet screen, which works extremely well, but you need another computer in order to use it. So you have the tablet, but you have to plug it into a laptop or a desktop computer in order to draw on it. Compared to the iPad Air and the iPad Pro, it's an all-in-one device. So I recommend one of those two tablets or the iPad to start out with your digital art career.
Hey man, just out of curiosity, what tablet do you use?
And the tablet I use now is the Cintiq 24HD that I have behind me, and then when I'm on the go, I use the iPad Air. Both are great tablets, but not necessary for starting with digital art. You can use the 22HD Cintiq tablet. If you want to work with the Wacom One that I discussed earlier, those are also very proficient tablets.
Hey there, so I want to ask you, which programs do you use for coloring? Thanks for answering.
Alright, so when I'm coloring, the programs that I use when I'm at home, I use Photoshop. And then when I'm on the go and using my iPad Air, I use Procreate.
Hey Dom, quick question. What brushes do you use?
Here we go again.
Okay, so that's a question I get, I think, probably 10 times a day is the brush question. What brushes do I use to make my art? So I have a bunch of special brushes that I use, and I've made several of them that I use in Photoshop that are also compatible for Procreate. So whether I'm here working on the big Cintiq tablet or I'm on the go with my iPad, I use those Photoshop brushes that are compatible for both. When I'm not using Photoshop or Procreate, I use Clip Studio, which is my favorite program for doing ink work and lining work, and I use the mapping pen or the texture pen. But if I don't feel like jumping back and forth from program to program, I have my own pencil set and my own inking and lining set that I use for both Photoshop and Procreate as well.
Hey, I've got a stupid question. What size canvas do you use when you make a big piece?
Okay, so the canvas question. So most artists work at 11 inches by 17 inches at 300 DPI. Me on the other hand, I'm a crazy person that works at 24 inches by 36 inches at 300 DPI.
Hold up, wait a minute.
And the benefit of this is you're able to work with a wide range of different clients. I'm working with different art galleries right now, and they like to have their pieces produced on canvas at 16 inches by 24 inches or a 24 by 36 inch canvas. But at the same time, there may be a comic book shop that wants to make a variant cover of that same canvas, and so they need that piece produced at 6.8 inches by 10.5 inches for the comic book cover size. And then let's say I'm working with a game company and they want to create cards for a board game from a cover that I did. They'll need that artwork produced at 3 inches by 3 inches or 2 by 3 inches. And the thing about digital art is you can always scale down, you can't scale up. So if I was working at 11 inches by 17 inches and I created a cool cover for a comic book company, and then the art gallery approaches me and says, hey, we want to make that on a canvas, that piece isn't going to be able to scale up as well because it was produced at a smaller size. And so this is why I work at such a huge size, is because I have a lot of different kinds of clients, and I work with so many different kinds of companies. I try to make sure that once I do a painting once, it works for all these different companies.
Nice.
Hey there. What are 2 essential items that every digital artist needs, especially in 2021?
Okay, so 2 essential tools that every artist need. First, you need some way to store your files. I think it's always dangerous keeping your files just on your desktop computer or on your iPad. So I highly recommend always having a Google Drive or upload your files to your iCloud. And the reason this makes life easier is there's always a safe place for your files, and it also frees up space on your device. And the second thing that I think every digital artist needs is a color wheel. And I think that color wheel needs to be specific to you and your style of art. I see a lot of artists make the mistake of always using the eyedropper. And with the eyedropper, you have a tendency to kind of pick colors that don't complement each other. They don't go together. And I think that's a huge fundamental of art, is knowing your color theory. And by having your own dead set color wheel, it helps you, solve these issues. I have my own color wheel, and because of that, I have a consistent style with my artwork. So I highly recommend, you can use my color wheel, you can create your own color wheel, but that's another thing I think artists definitely underestimate.
Hey, what up, Dominic? My question has to do with color. Do you work in RGB or CMYK, and why? Being in the printing business, it's a big deal to choose wisely. So give me your thoughts.
Okay, this is probably the hardest question to answer, but probably the most important one. So to understand what color space to work in, you first need to understand how does color and light work. So RGB is measured in light. So everything we see around us, whether you see it on a screen, your phone, your TV, is measured in RGB, which is red, green, blue. And all the colors we see, that's what it's made up of.
Ooh, that is crazy.
So with that, you have more options of color, right? Compared to CMYK is 4 colors, and it's thinking in regards to print. So when you see a comic book, when you see a magazine, all of those are printed in CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So I personally, like when you have those options, I work in RGB because you have all of the color options to work with.
I'd say things are getting pretty serious.
And so I use my color wheel for all my different colors, but at the same time, I use different, image adjustments. Sometimes I'll bump up the vibrance or the saturation, and that can kind of skew some colors and make, some colors that wouldn't be available in print. So the solution for this is I work in RGB, but then I convert my files to lab colors, so LAB. And what that is LAB is a file type that allows your printer to have more control of your file and the colors that they can work with. This isn't the case for every printer, but the printers that I work with, they always, ask me to work in RGB and then send them a TIFF file so that it doesn't reduce the file size and doesn't compress any information from when I painted the piece, and then have that TIFF file have the color setting to LAB. So hopefully that answers your question. I always recommend just talk directly to your printer and ask them like, hey, what should I work with or work in, and what kind of file do you need, and what does it need to be set at? Because every printer is different. So let me show you what that looks like. I want to show you what happens when you have your piece set to RGB and you print it that way, or if you set a piece to CMYK and you print it that way, and then when you set it to LAB or a lab color, and show you what that looks like as well. So let me show you. Okay, so here's a piece that I did, and this was done with one printer that worked with CMYK. So this piece right here was printed with the 4 colors, so cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So you can kind of see the colors, they look good. In my opinion, they look a little dull, and the reason I say that is because then there's this piece right here, And so this one was actually printed with RGB, and you may be confused, like, how did they do that? Well, they were working with a digital printer, and so now there's a lot of digital printers that are able to, you know, read and print RGB files. Not all printers have an expensive digital printer that can do this. So if you look at the colors here, there's the CMYK, and then there's the RGB on the digital printer. And then my favorite, this is a canvas done with lab colors. And so with the lab color, I sent this to the printer, and they were able to bump up the vibrance and the saturation because they had all the lab colors in a TIFF file, which had all the color information, whereas these two pieces had a limited amount of color information, and this one had the full color information for the printer to adjust.
Hey Dominic, question for you. How do you use reference when you're sketching or research before you start a sketch to end up with this beautiful artwork that you create?
So this question right here probably deserves its own video, but to summarize it real quick for you, I think every artist should use reference, and how I use reference is I always open up a new document, or I'll create a folder on my computer that has all the different images of things I need to know for that piece. So sometimes a client will reach out to me and say, hey, I need this specific character. And, you know, so I look up that character and pull up all these images of, like, what does their anatomy look like, and maybe there's some, you know, photo stills, or maybe there's some toys or statues that show how their costume reacts to different lights and shadows. So that's kind of how I organize my reference. I always recommend to spend like an hour to 2 hours just gathering reference, because, you know, you didn't invent this world, I didn't invent this world, so there's no reason for you and I to memorize how everything works. So hopefully that answers that, but I'll definitely do a more in-depth video on this concept in the future. So that's all the questions we have for today, but if you guys have a question, feel free to drop it in the comments below. If you want to join the Facebook group and send me a video question, you can go ahead and do that. Just message me on Instagram or Facebook and I'll add you. But yeah, guys, this was a lot of fun. I'm going to try and do more of these, and I'll check you out next time. All right, bye.